This is my interview with Dylan Neuwirth, and we're in his studio in Ballard, and we just finished a nice meal of Mediterranean
An
food.
amazing meal.
So I guess the first question I would like to ask you is, you come from Athens, Georgia, and how has that affected your artwork?
Yeah, I grew up in Athens, Georgia. I was born there in 1977. My parents worked at the university there, and I actually went to the University of Georgia and got a degree in sculpture. Growing up in Athens was very impactful, not only on me as a person, but obviously my entire aesthetic. And I say obviously because Athens, Georgia, it's a very unique place. It's often heralded as the birthplace of indie rock itself. We skateboarded at a sort of storage unit complex that REM practiced in. My mom actually taught Michael Stipe English in high school. So for me, growing up in Athens was very much an exposure to the idea that you could do whatever you wanted to do creatively and kind of whatever you wanted to do anywhere. Because Athens, located in Georgia, it's kind of like you have the South, and if you live in the South, you want to live in Athens. So Athens is a pretty curious mix because you have the eccentric Southern sensibility floating around. You also have the university there. So there's a lot of youth and a lot of energy combined with this very eccentric place. For instance, we have in the middle of the town square a monument to failure, and it was a double-barreled cannon that was used in the Civil War that killed every person who operated it. So they only tried it out 3 times, and it killed every single person who did it, and that was in the middle of our town. Those are the kind of eccentric things I think that gave Athens its character. So for me growing up, and growing up in the theater, it was this kind of sense where everyone was playing in someone else's band, and you were doing the album cover art for someone else's band. It was kind of like there were bands, there was performance, there was art.
So it was a very artistic place.
Absolutely.
So you went to school for sculpture, and what kind of works did you do exactly?
Well, I actually, it's interesting how I got to what I ended up doing. I took in high school a thing called AP, which was advanced placement classes. And so it could be for math, it could be for English, but you could also do it for art. But when you got out of the program, you had to submit your portfolio to be judged by some sort of official board, and you would get a score from 1 to 5. And if you got a 5, you would get all these credits to be able to knock off the introductory art courses you would take in college. Now I knew submitting my portfolio I would get the best score or the worst score, and I got the worst score. So I went into college actually taking the introductory art classes, got so dissatisfied with it I actually dropped out of school for 2 years. I ended up traveling the country. I ended up living in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, snowboarding for an entire season, and on the last day of the season we were in the board park taking all these big board jumps, and it was with my snowboarding buddies, and I said, hey, watch this, which was like some famous last words. So I ended up doing this huge jump, and it came down and cracked all the ribs on the side of my body.
And how long ago was this?
That was in 1998.
So were you in the hospital?
I was in the hospital, and I was just living in Colorado, kind of figuring out what I was going to do with my life, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to go back to school, and I'm going to do what I'm supposed to be doing in life, which is making art. So I came back and got into school and took one sculpture class, and I met a professor named Jim Buonacarsi, who was responsible for bringing iron casting back down to the studio art level in the country. And his approach to making sculpture was really, really forward-thinking, because he encouraged anything could be sculpture, whether it was a painting, whether it was a performance. It was really folded into the concept of what forward-thinking sculpture really was. So I fell into that, and at the same time we had a new director of the School of Art, Carmen Colangelo, who brought in all this technology like 3D modeling, rapid prototypers, powder coating, just brought all those tools and elements into our program.
So you got a very rounded education in the sculpture world.
I was exposed to all these new materials and techniques. It was totally killer, totally killer.
So in your work, do you prefer to collaborate or do you prefer to work alone?
Yeah, for me, it's highly collaborative the way I work because I think once you get to know me more, I have no shortage of ideas. It's kind of like an idea a minute. And by talking to people, it's really like forming out which idea is resonating the most, honing in on that idea and figuring out where we're going to go with it. Because although when you look at my work, it's aesthetically and materially all across the board, it's because I'm finding new people and new ways to actually realize the work. So now the way I work is a very high design type approach. It's a lot of hand drawing, and then it goes into much more of a digital way of rendering these objects and then finding the most appropriate way to build the object. So at this point, I collaborate with a specific carpenter, a neon fabricator, a glass blowing team, and then certain industrial fabricators to actually realize the work. So for me, working in the studio is kind of a way for me to think, conceptualize, and render these objects. And then I kind of consider Seattle my broader studio because I have to go work with these different teams in different places to actually realize the best, most perfect version of the work. And it goes that way for music too. A lot of the work that I make musically is by making tracks, emailing them to people. They add to those tracks, they get emailed back, and they go through the stages until they're finished.
Right. So that's good. So does some of your work with Chihuly, did that lead to working collaboratively with other people?
Absolutely. Working for the Chihuly studio totally changed my life, and it totally changed the way that I approach making art as well.
How long have you been doing that?
I've been with them for 5 years,
Mhm.
and I'm on the exhibitions and installations team.
And how did you get on that team?
You know, it's kind of random. I was a studio lead at a high-end metal fabrication studio,
Uh-huh.
and it was kind of going a different direction than I wanted to go in. So I applied to the studio to be a project coordinator because that's what I was doing for the high-end metal studio. And then when I got interviewed, the guy who interviewed me said, wow, looking at your skill set and looking at what you've done in your life, you might find this more interesting. And so then I started interviewing with that team, and I've been with them ever since.
Okay, now I want to change directions a little bit.
Absolutely.
So, what movie do you think influenced you? If you could choose one movie, which one do you think influenced you the most in your life and had
Blade
an
Runner.
effect?
Blade Runner.
Blade Runner. Why is that?
I think it was the first time, because I saw that movie actually when it came out. I was taken along to see it in the theater. I would have been about 3 or 4 years old. I didn't get a chance to go back and revisit it and see it again until it came out on VHS tape, if you kids remember those things. We rented that from Video Library on the east side of Athens where I grew up. And it just totally threw me for a complete loop. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. The way that the visuals were pulled off and the architecture, it was a fully realized stylistic vision. And it impacted me both with the vision of the architecture and style, the story that was so seemingly, in words today, pedestrian.
And also the movie has quite a sleek look, which is a
Absolutely.
reflection of your work,
Absolutely.
really. So here's another question for you. How do you think love has affected your work?
Interesting question. I think greatly. There's actually a new piece I'm working on, which is specifically about how my girlfriend Ryan and I met, and the piece is called Us. And what it's about is how I kind of envision time as this thing which there's not enough of, and we only have this certain set of amount of time to actually do what we want to do in life. So when you meet somebody where that thing happens, which we'll call love, it's almost like your two timelines twist towards each other and then start to merge. And that to me is what love really is all about. So it wasn't until I had actually experienced that for the first time in my life for real that I began to understand the power of what that could be. And it's actually made me completely reimagine all the work that I'm doing and all the work that I have coming up for the future.
So do you feel like that is motivating in a good way, or do you feel like that you work more when you're more tortured?
I feel like if you're an artist, you're going to work whether you're tortured or whether you're in love. But I think that the power of realizing what love can actually open up for you, and not in the sense that it's the only way to open up, but by truly knowing another, you can truly know yourself. And I think that when you're in the process of knowing yourself, everything else can fall in place.
Do you think that gives your work a little more of an emotional quality?
Oh, absolutely. I've taken a lot of criticism in the past for creating work that's extremely impenetrable, or that there's not a lot of points of entry into the work, or it could be cold, or that it's so conceptual that there's a lack of emotional depth there. And I think in the newer work, it's a completely 180. It's allowed me to realize that by making work for myself is one thing, making work for other people is one thing, but making it meet in the middle is the most important thing.
Now, today I brought you Mediterranean food.
Oh yes, my
So,
favorite.
why is it your favorite food?
I think what's interesting about it is it's sort of like when I realized the first time I ever had Mediterranean food. I remember my mom said, "We're gonna go to the Euro wrap today," when I was about 9 or 10, and it was like a local college Euro place, but it was extremely traditional. So it was the first time I had it, and for some reason eating that food seemed to just be some kind of stomach, brain, soul connection.
I guess I would like to know about the diamond. Tell me about the neon diamond.
Yeah, the diamond. It's funny, the way that I have always worked is that I've always been strongly attuned and drawn to graphics, and the way that a graphic, one simple, tiny design and form can allude to so many other conceptual ideas that are kind of the underpinning element to that one tiny symbol. So as I went through the last 10 years of my life, had some pretty crazy experiences over the last 10 years. I've lived a pretty hard life, and I had an event last year where I made a choice to change my life, realize some things about myself and move forward. My show, The Conversation, which was at the Punch Gallery, was a meta-narrative kind of about this experience I had where I was very near death.
What happened to you?
Well, in short, I had a what would be considered a pretty hardcore potential overdose that I should have by all reasons be dead, but had this what I call the conversation with myself, and did not die, and had this look in the mirror about myself on the side of the road off Aurora at about 3 in the morning, and turned right around and completely became sober and changed my life, and realized out of that experience is what the diamond meant to me all along, that it was a symbol that you are a lump of coal as you're born, and through heat and force and pressure and time, you become a multifaceted diamond. And the more you realize you have all these facets to your personality, not everybody knows every single facet about you, the more you know yourself, the more you can shine.
How old's your son?
My son is 7.
And what does he think of your work?
His name's Bowie, and he has a pretty funny take on it. He's a pretty nonchalant character. He kind of is in he's a little bit awestruck because I take him oftentimes, of course, to my shows. He comes to the studio, he goes to the Chihuly studio and sees the work going on there. So I'm often wondering what his take will be on it when he's older.
Is he an artist?
His favorite thing in the world is to draw. Yeah, he's an amazing artist, actually.
So let's end with this. If you could sum up, what your work means, how would you explain it?
I think the primary focus of my work is that we all experience time. And through our experiences in time, our identities change over the course of time through the power and memory and nostalgia of events. So really it's about the experience is defined by the expectation and the memory all at the same time. And that you only have a limited amount of time. And so really the power is now. And in now, you can go from a lump of coal to a fully fleshed out shining diamond, if you choose to.
Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.